There is something it is like to be you. Right now, in this moment, you are experiencing something. Perhaps you feel the weight of your body against the surface beneath you. Perhaps you hear these words as they come to you, either as sound through speakers or as thoughts formed in your mind as you read. Perhaps you notice the quality of light around you, or the temperature of the air, or the rhythm of your breathing. All of this is happening within your consciousness, within that private inner world that belongs to you alone. This experience of being, this awareness that is happening right now, is one of the most familiar things in existence. It is, in fact, the only thing you know directly. Everything else you know about the world, you know through consciousness. You know about trees and stars and other people because consciousness shows them to you. You know about your own body, your own history, your own thoughts, all through this medium of awareness. And yet, despite being so intimately familiar, consciousness remains deeply mysterious. What is it, this experience of being aware? Where does it come from? How does it arise? These questions have occupied philosophers and thinkers for thousands of years, and they continue to puzzle us today. Let us begin gently, without rushing, by simply noticing what consciousness is like. There is, first of all, the quality of experience itself. Philosophers sometimes call this qualia, a word that refers to the felt quality of conscious experience. The redness of red, for instance. When you see something red, there is a particular way that redness appears to you, a quality of experience that is difficult to describe to someone who has never seen red. You might say red is warm, or bright, or vibrant, but these words can only point toward the experience. They cannot fully capture it. The actual experience of seeing red is something that must be lived, must be felt, cannot be reduced to words or concepts. This is true of all conscious experience. The taste of chocolate, the sound of rain, the feeling of sadness, the sensation of being tired as you are now, all of these have qualities that are known directly through experience, but cannot be fully translated into language. You know what they are like because you have experienced them, but you cannot make someone else know what they are like through description alone. This subjective, experiential quality is at the heart of consciousness, and it is one of the things that makes consciousness so difficult to explain. As you lie here, becoming more comfortable, more relaxed, notice the texture of your own consciousness right now. There is the awareness of these words, flowing one after another. There is the awareness of your body, the places where it touches the bed or chair, the slight rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. There might be sounds in the background, perhaps distant traffic or the hum of a fan or the settling of a building. There might be thoughts drifting through your mind, fragments of memories or plans or random associations. All of this is happening within your consciousness, within that space of awareness that is you. But what is that space, exactly? Is it a place? Is it a thing? When we try to examine consciousness directly, something strange happens. We can be aware of objects, of thoughts, of feelings, but can we be aware of awareness itself? Can consciousness turn back on itself and observe what it is? This is a paradox that has intrigued philosophers for centuries. Consciousness seems to be the subject, the experiencer, but we are trying to make it into an object, something experienced. It is like trying to see your own eye, or like a finger trying to touch itself. There is always this gap, this distance that cannot quite be crossed. Some philosophers have suggested that consciousness is like a stage, a space where experiences appear. Thoughts and perceptions and feelings come and go like actors on a stage, while consciousness itself is the stage that remains constant, the background against which everything else happens. This is a helpful metaphor in some ways. It captures the sense that consciousness has a kind of spaciousness, a capacity to hold many different experiences. Right now, your consciousness holds the experience of hearing or reading these words, the feeling of your body at rest, perhaps some ambient sounds, perhaps some wandering thoughts. All of these coexist within the space of your awareness. But the metaphor of the stage can also be misleading because it suggests that consciousness is something separate from the contents that appear within it, something that exists independently and just happens to host these experiences. Many philosophers and contemplatives have suggested that this separation is illusory, that consciousness and its contents are not really two different things. When you are aware of a thought, is there consciousness, and then separately, the thought, or is the aware thought a single unified event? When you hear a sound, is there consciousness and then the sound, or is conscious hearing one seamless experience? Let your mind rest with this question gently, without trying to find a definitive answer. Just notice what your experience is like. When you're aware of the sensation of breathing, is there a separation between the awareness and the sensation, or are they woven together into one experience? You need not decide. Simply observe with a soft and relaxed attention what being conscious is actually like for you, right now, in this moment, as you continue to relax, to let your body settle more deeply into rest. We can explore another aspect of consciousness, another dimension of this mystery. Consciousness seems to have a quality of unity, of being one thing rather than many things. Right now, you are experiencing multiple sensations, thoughts, perceptions, all at once. There is the awareness of these words, the feeling of your body, perhaps sounds, perhaps images in your mind. And yet all of these experiences feel like they belong to a single consciousness, a single you. They are not scattered and separate. They are gathered together into one unified field of awareness. This unity is remarkable when you think about it. Your brain is made of billions of neurons, each one firing independently, each one engaged in its own small task. And yet, somehow, out of all this distributed activity, there emerges a single, unified experience. You do not experience the world as billions of separate fragments. You experience it as one coherent whole. The sight of a face, the sound of a voice, the meaning of words, the emotional tone of a situation, all of these are woven together seamlessly into a single experience of being present to another person. How does this happen? How do all these separate processes become one unified consciousness? This is sometimes called the binding problem, and it remains one of the deep mysteries of consciousness. We can trace the neural pathways. We can map which parts of the brain respond to color, which parts to sound, which parts to language, which parts to emotion. But we cannot yet explain how all of these separate processes are bound together into the unified experience that you are having right now. The unity of consciousness remains, at least for now, something of a miracle, something that happens but that we cannot fully explain. And yet, the unity is not absolute. Your consciousness also has a kind of multiplicity, a capacity to hold different elements in tension. You can be thinking about one thing while feeling something else. You can remember the past while perceiving the present. You can imagine the future while being aware of your body here and now. different streams of consciousness can flow alongside each other, sometimes merging, sometimes diverging, like rivers that meet and separate and meet again. So perhaps consciousness is not a simple unity, but a complex harmony, many voices singing together, creating something that sounds like a single melody, but is actually composed of many different tones. Let yourself feel this quality of your own consciousness. Notice how your awareness can hold many things at once, the words continuing to flow, the sensation of your body becoming heavier, more relaxed, perhaps a thought about tomorrow, drifting through, perhaps a sound from outside, perhaps the feeling of drowsiness beginning to gather around you. All of these coexist, all of them held within the spacious awareness that is you, and that awareness itself, is it one or many? Perhaps it does not need to be decided. Perhaps consciousness is both unity and multiplicity, both singular and plural, both simple and complex. As the minutes pass and your breathing becomes slower and deeper, we can turn our attention to another dimension of consciousness, to the relationship between awareness and the world. How is it that consciousness connects you to reality? How is it that, through the medium of consciousness, you know about things outside yourself? Right now, if you open your eyes, you see objects. If you listen, you hear sounds. These sights and sounds feel like they are out there in the world, separate from you, and yet you know them only through consciousness, only through the inner experience of seeing and hearing. This raises a profound question that philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. Are you directly aware of the world itself, or are you only aware of your consciousness of the world? When you see a tree, do you see the actual tree, or do you see a mental representation of the tree, an image constructed by your brain and presented to your consciousness? This distinction might seem subtle, but it has far-reaching implications. If you are only ever aware of representations, then you are in some sense trapped inside your own consciousness, separated from the world by the barrier of your own experience. Some philosophers have found this troubling. They worry that if consciousness is always between us and reality, we can never truly know what reality is like in itself. We can only know how it appears to our consciousness. The tree, as it really is, independent of anyone's consciousness, remains forever hidden behind the veil of experience. Other philosophers have suggested that this worry is based on a confusion, that the distinction between consciousness and reality is not as sharp as it might seem. When you are conscious of a tree, your consciousness is not separate from the tree, but is, in that moment, shaped by the tree, informed by the tree, participating in the reality of the tree. You need not resolve this philosophical puzzle. Simply let the question sit gently in your awareness. Notice what it is like to be conscious of your surroundings right now. Does it feel like you are directly experiencing reality, or does it feel like you are experiencing representations, or does the distinction dissolve when you look closely? Perhaps consciousness is not a barrier between you and the world, but a bridge, a way of being connected, a participation in reality rather than a separation from it. Your body continues to relax, continues to release the tensions of the day. The boundary between waking and sleeping is becoming softer, less distinct. This too is an interesting feature of consciousness. It has different states, different modes of being. Right now, you are in a state somewhere between waking consciousness and sleep. Your awareness is still present, still following these words, but it is becoming more fluid, more dreamlike. Thoughts drift more freely. The sharp focus of waking attention softens into something more diffuse and gentle. These different states of consciousness raise fascinating questions. What happens to consciousness during dreamless sleep? Does it disappear entirely, or does it continue in some form that you simply do not remember? When you wake up in the morning, is it the same consciousness that went to sleep, or has consciousness somehow been extinguished and then reborn? These questions might seem abstract, but they point to something important about the nature of consciousness. Is it a continuous stream that flows from birth to death, sometimes more active and sometimes less, but never truly interrupted? Or is it a series of discrete moments, each one arising and passing away, so that consciousness is constantly being created and destroyed? Different traditions have offered different answers. Some speak of consciousness as a flame that is passed from one moment to the next, each moment lighting the next, so that there is continuity, but not identity. Others speak of consciousness as an ocean, with waves rising and falling on the surface, while the depths remain constant and undisturbed. Still others speak of consciousness as an illusion, not a thing at all, but a process, a pattern, a way that information is organized and reflects back on itself. As you drift further into relaxation, into that borderland between waking and sleep, you might notice that consciousness has a quality of openness, of receptivity. It receives whatever arises without necessarily choosing what will appear. Thoughts come unbidden, sounds simply happen. Feelings emerge from depths you do not control. Consciousness, at least in its receptive mode, is like a mirror that reflects whatever is placed before it. It does not decide what to reflect. It simply shows what is there. And yet consciousness is also active, also creative. You can direct your attention. You can choose what to think about. You can imagine things that do not exist, remember things that are no longer present, plan things that have not yet happened. So consciousness is both passive and active, both receptive and creative, both mirror and lamp. It receives the world and it illuminates the world. It is shaped by reality and it shapes reality in turn. This dual nature of consciousness has led to endless philosophical debates. Are we fundamentally passive observers, watching a world that unfolds according to its own laws? Or are we active creators, bringing meaning and significance into existence through the very act of being conscious? Perhaps the truth lies between these extremes, or includes both. Perhaps consciousness is participation, a dance between receiving and creating, between being shaped by the world and shaping the world in turn. Let the rhythm of your breathing guide you deeper into rest. Notice how effortless breathing is when you do not try to control it. The body breathes itself. Consciousness observes. This simple act of breathing and being aware of breathing captures something essential about what it is like to be conscious. There is something happening, and there is awareness of that happening. The breath and the awareness of breath are intimately connected, woven together, yet somehow distinct. You are not the breath, and yet the breath is yours. You are not the awareness, and yet you are aware. These paradoxes point to the mystery at the heart of consciousness, the mystery of being a subject, an experiencer, an I. Who or what is this I that is aware? When you say I am conscious, what are you referring to? Is the I something separate from consciousness, something that has consciousness the way you might have a possession? Or is the I simply another name for consciousness itself, another way of referring to the fact of awareness? This question has occupied philosophers, mystics, and scientists for millennia. Some have claimed that the sense of I, the sense of being a separate self, is actually an illusion created by consciousness. They suggest that there is no I, no subject, no experiencer, only the experiencing itself, the flow of consciousness, without anyone to whom it belongs. Others have insisted that the I is real and fundamental, that consciousness necessarily involves a point of view, a perspective, a someone to whom things appear. They argue that you cannot have experience without an experiencer, cannot have awareness without something that is aware. The debate continues, as deep and unresolved as ever. But perhaps here, in this quiet space, in this gentle drift toward sleep, you need not take a position. You can simply notice what your own experience is like. Is there a clear sense of I, or does the I dissolve when you look for it closely? Perhaps sometimes there is, and sometimes there is not. Perhaps the I is not a fixed thing, but something that comes and goes, sometimes solid and sometimes transparent. As your consciousness becomes more diffuse, more dreamlike, we can consider another aspect of this mystery, the relationship between consciousness and the brain. Modern neuroscience has made remarkable discoveries about how the brain works, about which areas are active during different mental states, about how damage to specific regions affects consciousness in specific ways. When a particular area of the brain is damaged, certain aspects of consciousness might disappear. Someone might lose the ability to recognize faces, or to form new memories, or to feel emotions, or to understand language. This suggests a very close relationship between brain and consciousness. What the brain does seems to shape what consciousness is like. And yet, consciousness itself, the subjective experience, the what it is likeness, this seems to be something distinct from the physical processes of the brain. You can describe the neural activity in as much detail as you like, can map every synapse and measure every chemical and trace, every electrical signal, and yet nowhere in that description will you find the actual experience of seeing red or feeling sad or understanding a meaning. The physical description seems to leave something out, seems to miss the consciousness itself. This is sometimes called the hard problem of consciousness, the difficulty of explaining how physical processes give rise to subjective experience. Some philosophers believe this problem will eventually be solved, that we will discover how consciousness emerges from matter, how the objective becomes subjective. Others believe the problem is insoluble because consciousness is not the sort of thing that can be explained in physical terms. It is, they suggest, a different category of reality entirely, something that exists alongside the physical but cannot be reduced to it. Still, others suggest that the problem arises from a faulty assumption that matter and mind are not really two different things, but two aspects of one underlying reality. These debates need not trouble you now. Let them simply wash over you like waves lapping at the shore, present but not demanding, there but not insistent. Your body is heavy now, deeply relaxed. Your mind is quiet, thoughts moving more slowly, images becoming more dreamlike. This state you are in, this drowsy awareness, is itself a form of consciousness, different from waking alertness, but still a mode of being aware. And perhaps all of consciousness is like this, a spectrum of states from deep sleep to vivid waking, from focused attention to diffuse awareness, all of them variations on the fundamental theme of being conscious, of there being something it is like to be. Consider for a moment the consciousness of other beings. When you look at another person, you know they are conscious because they are like you. They speak, they respond, they show signs of inner life. But what about animals? What is it like to be a dog, a bird, an octopus? Do they have consciousness? Do they have inner experience? Most people believe that mammals, at least, are conscious. They behave in ways that suggest they feel pain and pleasure, fear and comfort. But what about insects? What about plants? Where does consciousness begin and end? Is it something that switches on at a certain level of complexity, or is it something that pervades all of life, perhaps in different degrees or different forms? These questions become even more puzzling when we think about machines. Could a computer be conscious? Could artificial intelligence, if it became sophisticated enough, have inner experience? Some say no, that consciousness requires biological processes, organic matter, the specific kind of complexity that evolution has produced in brains. Others say that consciousness is about information processing, and if a machine processes information in the right way, there is no reason it could not be conscious. Still, others suggest that we do not really understand what consciousness is well enough to answer these questions, that we are still at the beginning of understanding this mystery. Let your mind rest with the vastness of these questions without needing to answer them. There is something peaceful in acknowledging mystery, in recognizing that there are things we do not understand and may never fully understand. Consciousness is one of those things. Despite centuries of thought and decades of neuroscience, it remains deeply mysterious. And perhaps that is as it should be. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to be lived with rather than solved, to be experienced rather than explained. Your breathing has become very slow now, very regular. The boundary between your body and your surroundings feels less distinct. There is just experience happening, just consciousness flowing, without much sense of a separate you who is having it. This dissolution of boundaries is something that happens naturally as you move towards sleep, and it is also something that some contemplative traditions cultivate deliberately. They speak of consciousness expanding beyond the limits of the individual self, becoming aware of its own nature as awareness itself, not bounded by body or mind, but open and spacious like the sky. Whether or not consciousness truly has this unbounded nature, the metaphor captures something important about its quality. Consciousness does not feel like it is located anywhere in particular. You cannot point to a place in your body and say consciousness is here. When you close your eyes and pay attention to your inner experience, there is no sense of consciousness being crammed inside your skull. It feels more spacious than that, more open. Some have described consciousness as the space in which experience happens, suggesting that it is more like emptiness than like substance, more like an opening than like a thing. This space-like quality of consciousness might be related to its transparency. When you are conscious of something, your attention goes toward that thing, not toward the consciousness itself. If you look at a tree, you see the tree, not the seeing. If you think a thought, you are aware of the content of the thought, not the awareness that holds it. Consciousness is like a clear window that shows you the world, but is itself invisible. You look through it, not at it. And when you try to look at it directly, to examine consciousness itself, it seems to recede, to remain just out of reach, always the subject and never quite becoming the object. Some philosophers and contemplatives have suggested that this transparency is consciousness, recognizing itself, awareness being aware of awareness. They speak of a kind of consciousness that is not directed at anything in particular, but simply rests in itself, knowing itself directly without any object of attention. This is sometimes described as pure consciousness, consciousness without content, awareness without anything specific to be aware of. Whether such a state is possible, whether consciousness can exist without any content at all, remains a matter of debate and exploration. As the minutes continue to pass and sleep comes closer, we might consider one more dimension of consciousness, its relationship to meaning. Consciousness is not just bare awareness of sensations. It is awareness that understands, that interprets, that finds significance. When you hear a word, you do not just hear a sound, you understand its meaning. When you see a face, you do not just see colors and shapes. You recognize a person, perhaps with a flood of memories and feelings. Consciousness is saturated with meaning, always already understanding, always already interpreting. This semantic quality of consciousness is part of what makes it so rich, so layered. Every experience comes wrapped in associations, connections, implications. Nothing is experienced in isolation. Everything is part of a web of meaning that extends throughout your entire life, throughout your culture, throughout human history. When you look at the night sky, you do not just see points of light. You see stars. You understand them as distant suns. You might feel wonder or smallness or curiosity. All of this understanding, all of this meaning, is inseparable from your conscious experience. Where does this meaning come from? Is it something that consciousness adds to raw experience? A layer of interpretation placed on top of pure sensation? Or is experience already meaningful, already structured by understanding? This question returns us to the earlier puzzle about whether consciousness mediates between you and reality or participates directly in reality. If consciousness adds meaning to raw sensations, then it is between you and the world, interpreting and organizing what you receive. But if experience is already meaningful, then consciousness is not interpreting, but simply recognizing what is there, participating in the meaning that reality already has. These philosophical puzzles need not be resolved. They can simply be held gently, acknowledged, allowed to be present without demanding solutions. There is something deeply restful in dwelling with questions without needing answers, in contemplating mysteries without needing to solve them. The pressure to know, to understand, to figure things out can be released. Questions can simply float in the spacious awareness that is consciousness, held lightly, requiring nothing from you. Your consciousness right now is very quiet, very still. Thoughts are few and far between. The words continue to flow, but they are, like a gentle stream, something pleasant happening in the background, rather than something demanding your active attention. This receptive mode of consciousness, this allowing rather than grasping, is close to the consciousness of sleep. In sleep, consciousness does not disappear entirely, at least not in dreams. Instead, it transforms, becomes more fluid and less directed, more associative and less logical. The laws that govern waking consciousness loosen. Things that cannot happen in waking life happen easily in dreams. Identity becomes fluid. You might be yourself and also someone else. You might be in one place and simultaneously in another. Time becomes elastic. Cause and effect dissolve. What is consciousness doing in dreams? Is it creating the dream world, or is it exploring some other realm? Different traditions have offered different answers. Some say dreams are random neural activity, the brain processing memories and emotions without the organizing influence of waking consciousness. Others say dreams are meaningful communications from the unconscious, messages that need to be interpreted. Still, Others say dreams are journeys to other dimensions, places where consciousness can travel when freed from the constraints of the waking world. Perhaps all of these have some truth. Perhaps dreams are many things at once, just as waking consciousness is many things at once. As you hover on the edge of sleep, consciousness itself hovering between states, there is a kind of wisdom in simply observing what is happening without trying to categorize or explain it. Consciousness is what it is. It has the qualities it has. It does what it does. And you are it, and it is you, in a relationship so intimate that the distinction almost disappears. To be conscious is to be, and to be is to be conscious, at least for beings like us. The two cannot be separated, cannot be untangled. Your existence and your consciousness are the same thing, or so close to the same thing that the difference does not matter. This intimate identity between being and consciousness suggests something profound about the nature of existence itself. Some philosophers have argued that consciousness is not a special feature, that some things have and other things lack, but rather the inside view of what existence is like. From the outside, looking at a brain, we see matter, neurons, electricity, chemistry. But from the inside, being that brain, we experience consciousness. Perhaps these are not two different things, but two perspectives on one thing. Perhaps the universe itself has an inside and an outside, an objective appearance and a subjective experience, and consciousness is simply what it is like to be something from the inside. This view, sometimes called panpsychism, suggests that consciousness might be more widespread than we usually think. Not that rocks and rivers think or feel in the way we do, but that there might be some primitive form of experience, some proto-consciousness, that is a basic feature of matter itself. This remains a highly speculative idea, but it offers one way of thinking about how consciousness could arise from matter without being something entirely separate from matter. If consciousness is already there, woven into the fabric of reality from the beginning, then its presence in complex beings like humans is not a mysterious emergence of something from nothing, but an organization, an intensification of something that was always there. Whether or not this view is correct, it invites us to feel a kind of kinship with the world around us. If consciousness is not something that separates us from the rest of existence, but something that connects us to it, then we are not aliens in a dead universe, but participants in a reality that is, in some sense, aware all the way through. This does not need to be believed or affirmed. It can simply be held as a possibility, a different way of imagining our place in the cosmos, a perspective that might bring comfort or wonder or a sense of belonging. The darkness is deepening now. Your body is so relaxed that you have almost forgotten it. Consciousness is becoming very subtle, very refined. There is still awareness, but it is so gentle, so quiet, that it is like a whisper, like the softest breeze, barely there at all. And yet, it is there. Some part of you is still aware, still present, still conscious. Even as sleep approaches, consciousness remains, perhaps changing its form, but not disappearing entirely. In this quiet space, we can recognize that consciousness has been the constant companion of every moment of our lives. From the first awareness in infancy to this present moment, consciousness has been there, showing us the world, allowing us to experience, giving us the gift of being someone to whom something appears. We rarely think about this gift, rarely pause to notice the sheer fact of awareness. We are so focused on what we are conscious of that we forget to notice consciousness itself. But here, now, in this peaceful hour, consciousness can recognize itself, Awareness can be aware of awareness, not in a complicated or effortful way, but simply, directly, by noticing that right now, in this moment, there is experience happening, and that experience is not separate from you. You are not having consciousness. You are consciousness. You are the awareness within which everything appears. The thoughts, the sensations, the perceptions, all of these arise within consciousness, within you. They come and go. Consciousness remains. You remain. Even as everything changes, even as your body ages and your memories accumulate and your circumstances shift, there is this continuity of awareness, this thread of consciousness that runs through everything, that makes you you. This continuity is mysterious in its own right. What connects the consciousness you have now to the consciousness you had yesterday, or 10 years ago, or when you were a child? Your memories provide a sense of continuity, a narrative that links different moments into one life story. But consciousness itself, the raw fact of awareness, does it really continue, or is it reborn in every moment? Some traditions speak of consciousness as a succession of discrete moments, each one arising and passing away so quickly that they seem continuous, like frames in a film that appear to move smoothly when projected but are actually a series of still images. Others speak of consciousness as genuinely continuous, a stream that flows without interruption from birth to death. You need not decide between these views. Perhaps both capture something true. Perhaps consciousness is both moment and continuity, both succession and flow, both discrete and continuous. These paradoxes are part of the mystery, part of what makes consciousness so endlessly fascinating and so resistant to complete understanding. It is the most intimate thing we know, and yet it remains strange, foreign, not fully graspable. We are consciousness, and yet consciousness remains in some sense unknown to us. This unknowing is not a failure. It is simply the nature of consciousness, recognizing its own limits. Consciousness can know many things, can understand the world in remarkable ways, but it cannot stand completely outside itself and observe itself as if it were just another object. There is always this remainder, this aspect that cannot be fully captured, that slips away when we try to grasp it too firmly. And perhaps this is appropriate. Perhaps consciousness should remain mysterious, should preserve some secret at its heart that cannot be revealed. Perhaps the mystery is essential to what it is. As you continue to rest here, to allow sleep to come when it will, notice how consciousness accommodates everything. There is room for thoughts and for silence. There is room for comfort and for discomfort, though in this moment you are comfortable, deeply relaxed. There is room for certainty and for doubt, for knowing and for not knowing. Consciousness is capacious, inclusive, accepting. It does not reject what arises. It simply allows it to be, to appear, to have its moment and then pass away. This accepting quality of consciousness is something we can learn from. In waking life, we often resist our experience. We want things to be different from how they are. We push away what is unpleasant and grasp at what is pleasant. But consciousness itself does not do this. It receives everything equally, without preference, without judgment. The thought you would rather not think still appears in consciousness. The sensation you do not like still arises in consciousness. Consciousness makes room for all of it, holds all of it, with a kind of infinite patience. If we could meet our experience with the same patience that consciousness has, with the same acceptance, life might become easier, lighter. We would still have preferences, still move toward what we value and away from what we do not. But there would be less resistance, less struggle, less suffering. We would be more like consciousness itself, open and spacious and allowing, receiving what comes without clutching or pushing away. This is not something that can be forced or willed. It arises naturally when we recognize the nature of consciousness, when we see how it works, when we learn from its example. The minutes have passed, and sleep is very near now. The boundary between waking and sleeping has become so thin that you may not even notice when you cross it. Consciousness will continue, but it will change its mode, will become the consciousness of dreaming rather than the consciousness of waking, and then perhaps it will become the consciousness of deep sleep, which is so subtle that you will remember nothing of it, will have no sense of time passing, will seem to have disappeared entirely, even though some awareness must remain, some minimal registration that you are, that you exist, that keeps the organism functioning through the night. And then, in the morning, consciousness will brighten again, will return to its waking mode, and you will open your eyes, and the world will appear once more, and you will be here again, aware again, conscious again. This cycle has repeated every day of your life. It will continue as long as life continues. Consciousness fading and brightening, withdrawing and emerging, like breathing in and breathing out, like the tide flowing out and flowing in. It is the most natural thing in the world, this rhythm of consciousness, and yet it remains mysterious, this daily death and rebirth, this letting go and returning, this dissolution and reconstitution of the self. Let yourself surrender now to this natural rhythm. Let consciousness do what it does, what it has always done. Let it fade into sleep without resistance, without trying to hold on to waking awareness. Trust that it will return in the morning. Trust that you will be there when you wake, that the thread of continuity will not be broken. This trust is not about belief or faith in something uncertain. It is about recognizing a pattern that has proven itself reliable every day of your life. Consciousness has always returned. It will return again. And if we could extrapolate from this daily rhythm to the longer arc of life, perhaps we could trust that consciousness continues in some form even beyond death. Many traditions believe this. They speak of consciousness as eternal, as something that cannot be destroyed, that continues after the body falls away. Whether this is true, we cannot know with certainty while we are alive. But the daily experience of consciousness returning after the apparent oblivion of sleep might offer some grounds for hope, some reason to think that consciousness is more resilient than the body, more fundamental than the physical processes that support it. But these thoughts are for another time. Right now, in this moment, what matters is simply the fact of consciousness itself, the bare reality of being aware. Everything else is speculation, philosophy, theory, but consciousness itself is immediate, direct, undeniable. Descartes was right about this, at least. You cannot doubt that you are conscious. You might doubt everything you perceive, might question whether the world is real or illusory, might wonder whether you are dreaming or awake. But you cannot doubt the consciousness that is doing the doubting. To doubt is to be conscious. To think is to be conscious. To wonder, to question, to observe, all of these require consciousness. It is the foundation, the ground, the basis of everything else. And yet, despite being foundational, consciousness is also mysteriously insubstantial. You cannot weigh it or measure it or put it in a box. It has no color, no temperature, no texture. It is not in space, or if it is, its location is impossible to pin down. It is not in time, or if it is always in the present moment, never in the past or future. Past and future appear in consciousness now, as memories and anticipations, but consciousness itself is always now, always present, always here. This nowness of consciousness is absolute. Even when you think about the past or future, you are thinking those thoughts now. Even when you remember yesterday or imagine tomorrow, the remembering and imagining happen now. You can never escape the present moment because consciousness is present moment. This might seem obvious, but it points to something profound. Consciousness is the eternal now, the ever-present present. It is what makes the present moment the present moment. Without consciousness, there would be no present, no now, just events following one another in a sequence that has no perspective, no place from which it is experienced. Consciousness is the place from which time is experienced. And perhaps consciousness is also the reason time exists at all, at least as we know it. Perhaps time is something consciousness creates or participates in creating, by its very nature as the present moment awareness that moves through events, that experiences succession, that knows before and after, past and future, earlier and later. But again, these are deep questions that can be contemplated another time. For now, let them simply dissolve into the general sense of peace and relaxation that is filling you. Let all questions dissolve. Let all wondering cease. Let there be just this gentle awareness, this quiet consciousness, receiving whatever arises, without grasping, without analyzing, without needing to understand. Just being aware, just being conscious, just being. This simple being is what consciousness is at its most fundamental. Before all the complexity, before all the thoughts and emotions and perceptions, there is just this basic fact of awareness. Something is aware, something is conscious, something is experiencing, that something is you, and you are consciousness itself. And consciousness is the mystery at the heart of existence, the inside of reality, the light by which everything appears, the space in which everything arises, the knowing that makes anything knowable. Rest in this knowing, rest in consciousness itself, rest in the awareness that has been your constant companion through every moment of your life. It has never abandoned you. It has never been absent. Even when you forgot to notice it, even when you were lost in thoughts or caught up in activities, consciousness was there, silently witnessing, quietly being. It is here now. It will be here when you wake. It is what you are, most essentially, most truly. You are consciousness. You are awareness. You are the light of knowing itself. And with this recognition, with this return to the simplest truth of your being, let sleep come. Let consciousness transform into its sleeping mode. Let awareness become the awareness of dreams, or the deep rest of dreamless sleep. Let go of waking. Let go of thinking. Let go of everything. Just be. Just rest. Just allow consciousness to do what it does, to fade and return, to sleep and wake, to breathe in and breathe out, to live this eternal rhythm that is at the heart of being conscious, at the heart of being alive, at the heart of being at all. Rest now. Rest completely. Rest in consciousness itself, in awareness itself, in the mystery itself, forever present, forever here, forever now.